Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is All Access Med School Admissions. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and if this is your first time hearing this podcast, welcome to the show. The goal of this project is for you to be able to hear from the actual decision makers in the med school admissions process. The people on here, that includes myself, aren't guessing at what med schools want. We actually know what med schools are looking for, and I'm trying to transmit that information to you via this podcast. So if you have questions for me to ask my guests, or if you want to suggest a school to be featured, then please email me at allaccess@case.edu. It's that easy, and I'll respond. If you're a returning listener, then I want to thank you. I feel like you're giving me a gift, and that is the gift of your time. I've had so many people tell me that this podcast is the soundtrack on their commute to work or school, or it's pumping through their ears while they're pipetting rows and rows of samples in the lab. However you're listening to this podcast, I want to sincerely thank you. So shout out to everybody out there. I really appreciate it. Well, a lot's been going on since the last episode dropped. Couple things. The AAMC Pre-Med Navigator came out with their new list of 5 podcasts to listen to, and they named this podcast on that list. How cool is that? They also recommended the Pre-Med Years with Dr. Ryan Gray, who was kind enough to have me on his podcast a couple months ago. There's another one called Bedside Rounds, and another called Two Docs Talk, and The Undifferentiated Medical Student by my guy, Dr. Ian Drummond. Ian started TUMS, as it's also called, when he was a med student here at Case, and is now continuing it as a resident at Hopkins. Speaking of the AAMC, they have a newly designed website coming out this week. So if you haven't bookmarked aamc.org, you better make that a top priority, as it is an essential resource for any pre-med out there. Finally, it's mid-September, and interview season is in full swing at admissions offices around the country. Admissions committees and application screeners are reviewing applications day and night, so this is always a busy time of year for us. What's been different for me this year is that I'm now meeting listeners of this podcast. We've started our interview days and done a couple early recruiting events, and people have been coming up to me telling me they're a listener of the show, and it really blows my mind. In fact, I interviewed a guy who told me that he was really excited to find out that I was his interviewer because he was an avid listener of the show. And I got to say, that kind of knocked me back a couple steps because I'm just not used to this sort of recognition. So, hey, there's a shout out to Joel in Oregon. So there you go, Joel. And again, a huge thanks to everyone that's listening and telling their friends about this resource. If you can, on Apple Podcasts, give it 5 stars and put a comment in. It helps get that word out to other people through the Apple Podcast algorithm. So I'd appreciate that too. Okay. Let's get to today's show. I have a special treat for you. It's the admissions team from the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine, plus a bonus guest, one of their medical students who sits on their admissions committee and is actively involved in their admissions process. We thought it'd be fun and insightful for you to hear the value that medical students bring to the admissions process. So before I tell you about my special guests, let me tell you a little bit about the school I'm featuring today. The University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine is located on the south side of Chicago, Illinois, in a neighborhood called Hyde Park. Also, Lake Michigan is right down the street from the campus, so it's really cool and a very pretty location. Pritzker was established in 1927 and shares the same campus with the undergraduate institution and the University of Chicago Medicine's hospital system. Pritzker is an integral part of a world-class university that values an atmosphere of interdisciplinary scholarship and discovery. They are dedicated to inspiring diverse students of exceptional promise to become leaders and innovators in science and medicine for the betterment of humanity. Pritzker is a private institution and accepts applicants from Canada, international students, and applicants who have the DACA status. Additionally, there is no state residency requirement. For the entering class of 2019, the medical school received 5,730 applications and interviewed 639 applicants for a class size of 90. 44% of their 2019 entering class were comprised of women, and 31% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. 73% of the matriculating students took at least one gap year prior to beginning medical school, which is interesting. The University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine is proud to offer their medical students opportunities for interdisciplinary learning, clinical training, and protected curricular time for mentored research in a setting where experts from all disciplines contribute to the development of physicians in training. Students are supported by a robust advising system led by expert faculty career advisors. And in 2019, Pritzker received the AAMC's Careers in Medicine Excellence in Medical Student Career Advising Program Award, which annually acknowledges the accomplishments of one medical school in assisting students with their career development and planning. That's some great stuff there. So let me tell you a little bit about the people from Pritzker that you're going to be hearing from today. Dr. Kimmy Carter obtained her bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University and her medical degree from the University of Alabama School of Medicine, which we featured on episode 10. Dr. Carter completed her residency training in emergency medicine at the University of Chicago Medical Center, where she also served as a chief resident. She subsequently stayed as a faculty member and is currently the director of undergraduate medical education for the section of emergency medicine and the director of emergency medicine clerkship. She was named as a junior faculty scholar in the Bucksbaum Institute for Clinical Excellence, and she has been appointed as the Associate Dean for Admissions for the Pritzker School of Medicine. Emily Sharp Keller is the Director of Admissions at Pritzker. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Alabama and a JD from the University of Chicago Law School in 2014. She's worked in admissions at Pritzker for 5 years, and Emily lives in Hyde Park, and you can find her cheering on the Crimson Tide on Saturdays in the fall. And lastly, the medical student that's joining us today is Balaji Jyotishankar, who is a fourth-year MD MBA student. He served as a member of the Student Admissions Committee last year and continued on with that role this year. He has also been involved with admissions by hosting candidates, interviewing candidates, and co-chairing their revisit activities. He's also very involved in other activities at the medical school, including research, mentoring, and does some free pre-medical counseling for socioeconomically disadvantaged students. In his free time, Balaji enjoys trying out different restaurants throughout Chicago, running on the Lakeshore Path, and playing intramural sports. There you go. So that's the background and the guests you're going to be hearing from today. So, hey, let's just jump right into it with Dr. Carter, Emily, and Balaji. Well, hello, Dr. Carter, Emily, and Balaji. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I am thrilled to have all three of you on the show. The first time I've had three people on one show.
We're excited to be here.
This has been so fun. When we made the connection that we got this date set and locked in, I've been doing my homework, and I cannot wait to hear more about University of Chicago, Pritzker, and I think a lot of people are listening right now in the same boat. So, but before we kind of get into all the things there is to know about Pritzker, why don't I just let's go around the table, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, and just Dr. Carter, let's start with you. Okay. Like, what's been something that you've been doing admissions now for several years? What's been something that you really it gets you out of bed in the morning when it comes to going to work and doing admissions stuff?
Well, I can say that there are a lot of things that get me out of bed in the morning with regards to my professional life, specifically with regards to admissions. I honestly feel that we are playing a part, even though some would say a very small part, in really just moving medicine forward. We are, we're playing a part in selecting the future doctors that will influence the medicine landscape in this country and globally even. And That is a very heavy thing and inspiring thing.
Yeah.
And I get to see the fruits of our labor as they move through the process. And I think admissions is one of those things where you can actually see development and see how students are progressing from the moment you meet them all throughout the curriculum. And so I think that it's just very gratifying to play a part in this.
What do you do for fun? I mean, you work hard. I mean, we just read your bio. You're a busy professional. Like, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun?
Blow out some steam. Yeah.
Well, I have 3 kids. And they keep me very busy. So I love being with them. I love watching my one son play baseball and my other son do taekwondo. And I love getting my nails done with my daughter. And I love, I think blowing off steam for me, it does include working out and making time for that space to re-energize.
Yeah.
And then I love to eat. And so I love the Chicago food scene as well. And
I bet all 3 of you do.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yes. Absolutely.
How about you, Emily? You've been in admissions now for about 5 years. Like what is it that drives you or gets that you get excited about?
Yeah, honestly, for me, it's the medical students themselves. So kind of similar to what Dr. Carter was saying, just the true privilege of getting to see amazing future physicians and to introduce them to a place that I love. I went to graduate school here at UChicago, and I love this community. I love this school. And so the opportunity to introduce that to some really amazing applicants and have them come in and eventually matriculate at the medical school and then watching them grow is really just an honor. I feel like I am extremely lucky that I love my job and literally love coming into work every day. I feel very, very lucky to get to do what I do. And the team also is amazing. I mean, I think I'm lucky that the applicants are so great, but seeing Dr. Carter and our other admissions faculty and the students like Balaji who are involved and seeing how much everybody on this side of it cares about the applicants and wants to give them every consideration and thoughtfully put together this class and seeing how much hard work goes into it from my side of things really makes me feel good about the process that we have here. So I'm pretty lucky that I just love my job a lot.
Yeah. It's energizing.
Yeah.
It is energizing, I think. I mean, I've said this before on this podcast that we have some of the best jobs. I'm telling you what, I'm really biased, but we have some good jobs. It's like easy, makes it easy to get up and go to work every day.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, what's something that you find people are surprised to learn about you?
I think people are surprised to learn if they, haven't known me for more than 5 minutes that I am a huge college football fan. I think I've lost most of my Southern accent, but I grew up in the South. I went to Alabama for college, and I think people are really surprised that I will not do anything on a Saturday in the fall unless it involves watching the Crimson Tide. Yeah. So I think they're always a little surprised to find sort of where my roots are, especially because I've been in Chicago so long now.
Well, you're lucky that your team always gets prime time, coverage. You don't have to go searching for it on like ESPN + or something. It's on prime time every weekend.
That's right. I know. It's so true.
All right, Balaji. Hey, you're on the back nine of your time at Pritzker. So what's been a highlight for you?
Yeah. With regards to admissions, I really enjoy meeting new people. I think that's something that if you go into medicine, you're meeting new people every day, but to meet people who are extremely driven to make a change is always inspirational and always kind of reminds me why I went into this field and the idealistic views that I should have when I'm in the hospital. And then the other part of it that I really enjoy was just creating these longitudinal relationships with people who I will interview and then I'll see again at revisit and then we'll matriculate as students just to help them out in any way I can. Yeah. It's always a pleasure to do that. That's
fun. So Chicago's become your new hometown. I mean, you're not originally from there. right?
Yeah, I'm actually from Florida, so the Chicago winter was a bit of a shock to me. But I slowly adapted. Got a nice big winter coat, and
Yeah, you got a new wardrobe. Look at it that way.
Absolutely, and got some new sports teams as well. So it's been a really great city to me, and I've really enjoyed my time here.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm like I said to begin, I'm really thrilled to have all three of you on here, and we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about curricular highlights. We're going to talk about the selection process and the application process and the admissions committee, and just kind of march our way through. So Dr. Carr, let's start with let's talk about the things that when you're out meeting prospective applicants at a fair or giving a talk, what are some of those curricular highlights that you want people to know about Pritzker School of Medicine?
Sure. So there are many because
sure.
I actually am coming from the perspective of being the associate dean for admissions, but also being a practicing physician within our hospital, and I serve as the clerkship director in emergency medicine, and I really and truly believe that I believe in the process that takes place here at Pritzker, because I have the true privilege of working with so many of the students, and I see what they can do before they leave. And so with regards to the curriculum, I think that I'll start by saying I can't emphasize enough that we are really a mission-driven school. And so our curriculum really emphasizes what we are trying to develop in our medical students. So I think, one of the highlights would be our scholarship and discovery program. And, we have a program that's integrated into the core curriculum, and it provides our students with focused, protected, and funded time to do their research. We are, I know that not all medical students that graduate from Pritzker will be researchers, but they all are scholars, and we take that development very, very seriously. So I think that is certainly a highlight. And the way that the scholarship and discovery program is structured really ensures that our students will have a scholarly product by the time they apply to residency, which is an important part of the application. I think the other parts of our curriculum that I want to highlight would be the fact that we have a curriculum where the foundational sciences run in parallel with what we call physicians, patient, society, and systems. That include things like studying healthcare disparities and the American healthcare system and the doctor-patient relationship. And our curriculum emphasizes the importance of both the foundational sciences and the development of an understanding of where the medicine landscape is and what patients are experiencing within that landscape. And yeah.
Let me jump in and ask you a couple questions really quickly. Is the scholarship and discovery? That's what it's good. Scholarship and discovery do all students have to do that?
All students have to do that. That's correct.
Okay. And I wanted to really emphasize something you said was that it's important. It could be an important piece when somebody's going to apply for residency, because basically everybody graduating from Pritzker has research on their residency application. Correct?
That's true. Every single student. That's right.
Okay. So then put on your residency clerkship director hat. How important is that?
Well, I will say I'm not the residency director. I won't take that. I won't take that away from my colleague.
I misinterpreted that.
But I am the clerkship director, and I do participate.
Yes, director.
But I do participate in the selection of emergency medicine residents for our program as well. And what I will say is that we all know that the residency application process is certainly not becoming less competitive. And it is important for students, especially when they are looking potentially at academic careers, to have robust research experience under their belt. Because in particular, a lot of academic programs will emphasize the engagement in robust research during medical school. And all of our students have that.
From a physician's perspective, you've been through this. You're seeing medicine unpackaged every day in the emergency department. How is that? What's your perspective on the curriculum that you see at Chicago?
The curriculum is so great because I see the product of exceptional clinicians. I literally can work in the emergency department, and our setting, I will mention, is very high acuity, very complex patients, and I will work with students who are functioning clearly at the level of interns. And I trust them to do that. And they are able to step up to the bedside of patients and not only assess and evaluate them and develop treatment plans, but they are able to walk alongside our patients in their most vulnerable moments and support them and comfort them. And it is a beautiful thing to see. And I think it's one of the reasons that I have chosen to spend my professional career here at the University of Chicago, because I think our students are just so amazing in that regard. They're so smart, yes, but they are also just good humans who are able to inhabit the reality of patients for even a few moments to provide the best care for them. And so I see how the process works. I see the value in our curriculum because I see the product.
Yeah. Balaji, tell us what's a typical week kind of like in those first 2 years? Is it the same throughout the entire first 2 years? Like, what's life like as a student in those first year or two?
Yeah. So what's really nice about Pritzker is that we're pass fail. And so when you first come to Pritzker, your schedule kind of varies based on what course you're in. So we start off with anatomy, and that's kind of like our boot camp. It's your introductory to medical school. Everyone's taking all the classes at the same time. It's a great way to meet classmates because you're thrown in a pool with 80 new people. And then you also get to learn how you learn best, because getting introduced to medical school information comes at a different pace than undergrad information. So whether you learn best by flashcards or reviewing lectures, I think that's really influenced by how you do anatomy. So during that time, I would say most students are here from 8 to 5:30. In the BSLC is where we have our classes. After we finish up anatomy, our schedule actually kind of opens up and we'll go into our CMG course, or I think it's our cell bio course that we take. And that has a lot more free time. And so that would meet, I think 3 times a week. And then you have time to do other activities. This is when you start getting involved in clubs around campus, get involved in the free clinics. I started working at a startup during that time as well. And so I got exposure to a lot of things during that time. And then as you progress during your first to your second year, it gets more focused towards board studying, which I really appreciated, because one thing about Pritzker, which is nice, is you just see a lot of the material over and over again. So if you don't catch it the first time during your physiology course, during your first year, during second year, when you see it again in our pathology course, it's a good refresher of everything that you learned.
That's great. Hey, Balaji, when in the first 2 years of the curriculum, after the anatomy piece, are the classes a lot of small group work? Is it a lot of lecture? Is it a hybrid? How's that structured?
Yeah, so I think every class that we have does have a lecture component. And then what's really nice is certain classes, such as our doctor-patient relationship, our cell bio course, even our microbiology courses have small group components where you can kind of branch out and learn from classmates in a small group setting with a attending as well.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Carter, I want to get back to a question that we get a lot as admissions people at every medical school is, how early can I get out and see patients, or how early do you send me out to start to do medical school-y things? So what's that look like?
And that is a good question, I think, for students, because I like to say that seeing patients early reminds you of why you're doing this. Mm-hmm. And it is important, in my opinion, to raise your head up from the books and the computer and engage with patients, as not only to practice your clinical skills, but to keep proper perspective on why you're studying all that you're studying. So at Pritzker, we do get our students back in the clinical or into the clinical setting very, very early. So as they start finishing anatomy in that very first quarter, they will start their clinical skills curriculum. They will start what we call our longitudinal program, where the students are either assigned to a specialty of their choice and have a faculty mentor that they will work with throughout the whole year, or they can opt for a patient-centered approach where they actually will follow and be a caregiver of the patient, one particular complex patient who engages in our healthcare system. And throughout that longitudinal program, they are meeting competencies and they are developing their clinical skills. And so again, this starts very early, right after anatomy finishes. And Balaji mentioned our free clinics. This is also the time when our students start working in our free clinics, and we have 5 of them.
I read that. I saw 5 free clinics.
Yes.
I had to go back and read it again.
Right.
Balaji, were you involved? How are you? Tell us about your experience when you started those early clinical experiences. I'm sure they just didn't throw you to the wolves. There was a whole process there that kind of ramped you up. What was that like?
Yeah, actually, it's really nice because we have a lot of peer mentorship here. And so we'd have, before we even go to free clinics, there's a whole night where 4th year medical students will kind of review things on like how to give a shot, how to take a history, how to do a lot of day-to-day things that I now take for granted when I go see a patient. And then Dr. Farnan, who's our head of clinical skills, will also go over how to take a history and how to just have appropriate bedside manner. And I'll admit, it was very awkward going to clinics right off the bat and seeing patients. But Dr. Carter always brings up the Karate Kid and says she Miyagi's us, and she tries to teach us just like one little skill, and then eventually we'll be able to do the whole move by ourselves.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that way. I'd go in, practice one specific skill with the patient in the free clinic, and then when we had our standardized patients, and I'd be like, wow, I missed everything else. But then as I progressed and saw more and more patients over the course of the first 2 years, I felt very comfortable transitioning to the wards. And it was nice because when I transitioned to the wards, Dr. Farnan was also the first preceptor I worked with during my 3rd year. So she knew what I knew and knew what I didn't know. And it was nice to have that transition as well.
When you reflect back, Balaji, on those first couple years, what's a highlight you would tell somebody that's listening to say, hey, what's 1 or 2 highlights that you just stand out to you in your experience in your last 5 years there?
Yeah. So I think the curriculum is great. I think all of that's great, but it's really the people, the people here, the classmates that I've made, the mentors that I've made. It's just a phenomenal group of individuals in this community who are all doing amazing things. And it's just a great place for you to learn from other people who are doing very, very interesting and challenging work. And they challenge your viewpoints on certain things. And I think that's something I'll definitely take away, not only from my first 2 years, but all 5 years now that I've been here.
Yeah, I have to bet that if we were talking to some of your classmates, they'd probably say some similar things too, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about research and how that's integrated into the curriculum, and it's everybody has to do it. And it sounds like you guys have a nice chunk of time carved out. Another common question that we get as admissions people is, what about global opportunities? Are there opportunities for students to do things overseas? I mean, I'll just kind of throw this out to anybody.
Sure, I can answer. So we do have a Center for Global Health here at the University of Chicago. And under the umbrella of the Center for Global Health, the students have both service and research opportunities. And so with regards to scholarship, there are students whose research falls into the global health track, and they may go abroad for their blocks of research time. And I actually think in our first year class, or our current second year class who just finished their block of research time, we had students who were in Greece and other different parts of on the continent of Africa, all over the place. Wow. and conducting their research for that block of time. So that is an opportunity for students who want to engage in research on the global scale abroad, outside of the continental United States. And there also are service opportunities, again, under that umbrella of the Center for Global Health. So most of the time, well, there are opportunities within student groups to go abroad and serve together. And I'm one of the opportunities, one of the groups is called Remedy, and they've generally gone to Peru to serve. But students can create electives, clinical electives, and go abroad to serve in a clinical capacity as well. So both research and service opportunities, clinical service opportunities, are available.
Speaking of service, I noticed that when I was doing some research, that University of Chicago has a 50 plus student organizations. And so they're not alone. A lot of medical schools have student organizations and lists, as long as my arm. Balaji, what might be some of the student orgs that most Chicago students get involved in? Is there a couple that, everybody just bands together and does like a couple of these same things? Or is it kind of people find their niche and go in their own direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the free clinics is something that everyone gets involved with in some capacity, whether it's as a volunteer or as a part of the executive board for one of the free clinics. We have 5 of them. So each of them serves a different patient population, and people will go to certain patient populations that they're more drawn to. But I think the unique thing about Pritzker is you don't necessarily need to do what everyone else is doing. And so you have the opportunity to do a lot of different clubs. So I was involved with the Chicago Youth Program, which was mentoring students, high school students on the south side of Chicago. And then I have a peer who's in the Pritzker Brewing Club, so they make home beers.
So these are both not medically related.
Yeah, they're not medically related, and I think it's great because you learn a lot just from doing a lot of things that aren't medically related, and you can take those skills and apply it to medicine. And it's a good way to relate to the community and get involved with the community as well.
So what I'm hearing, Balaji, is that yes, there is time for fun as a medical student at Pritzker.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so fun really doesn't go to die at the University of Chicago.
No.
Fun gets resuscitated.
Maybe at the med school level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. One other question for Balaji I want to ask you. Common question that we always get, and you know this because I bet you asked this question or somebody did when you were in an interview day. How much time do you get to study for boards?
Yeah, I think that question is becoming more and more popular with pre-medical students, because when I was applying to medical school, I thought I was done. I was like, I'm in med school. I don't have boards, anything. So it was, but to answer your question, it's we get 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I thought what was really nice was the course that we take leading up to those 6 weeks is taught by Dr. Scott Stern, Dr. Hussein, and then Dr. Hussein Sitar. And Dr. Sitar wrote the book called Pathoma, which is used across the country for students to study for step one. And to have his influence on the course, it's quite evident. And it provides a great foundation for us that when we hit our dedicated time, 6 weeks almost feels like too much time. And I actually recommend students at Pritzker to take a little less time than that. So yeah, I feel like we're very well prepared when it comes to our dedicated study block.
And I know some other schools, case included, that have 6 weeks of carved out time. And I think some students, pre-meds, kind of look at that, only 6 weeks, Mike, but you're not there. That's a lot of time. And that's a fair chunk of time to be setting aside simply or just dedicated to studying for step one. And like you said, I think some students are, if they book it out 6 weeks, like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have booked it at 4 weeks. Because you just I've seen students reach a saturation point and they're just miserable, or they're just like, gosh, get on with it anyway. So Dr. Carter, what do you think about that from your perspective?
I agree. I will say that, our students do very well on step one. And the truth is that I think our curriculum, again, prepares them to be clinicians, but also is very deliberate in making sure, like Balaji said, that they see the material, then they see it again, and they are remembering it and learning it instead of, just memorizing it and never seeing it again. So I think that the curriculum, our curriculum, is designed such that they will be prepared to have that study block. And again, year after year, we see how successful they are in getting through that test.
Yeah. I want to kind of wind down the curricular piece here, but I want to bring in Emily, and you've been so patient. And I want to ask you, I was looking at your website, and your website's really nice and very organized. But what's something that you wish people knew about Chicago that you can't find on a fancy, well-organized website that you wish people knew?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me and that I've seen just come true over and over again over the past couple of years is how much our faculty care about the development of each individual student. And you'll see on our website that we're a small school, and students, I think, will read that and think, oh, that's great, or oh, classes will be small. But our faculty here know our students individually. So like Balaji was saying earlier, embarking on your third year and having the faculty members that you're working with clinically be the people that help teach you clinical skills and have known you for, at that time, 2 full years of your life, and care about you becoming a great clinician, but also care about helping you achieve your goals. I'm always amazed by how that's true for every single student, and how much the administration here and the faculty here really care about the students and are here to just help them do as well as they possibly can, and to figure out what they want to do in medicine, and to get them ready to be really amazing leaders in medicine. So I'm always astonished by that. And it's really gratifying, I think, to work at a place where it is small and the relationships are personal, and we actually get to know about our students and care about them individually. So that always is amazing to me.
Yeah. Emily, when you're out on the road and talking with prospective applicants, is there like some kind of common myth or misconception about Chicago that you're like, you put your hands in your head like, oh my gosh, like, no, we're not this or we're not that you hear from perspectives, or like there's something they think they know about Chicago, but it's incorrect?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's all kinds of things. That's why we go out on the road to get the word out. Some of them I think are, about the medical school itself, right? So I think pre-medical students often think that medical school is going to be like 10 notches up in terms of level of intensity, right? They've worked so hard in undergrad. They want this so bad. They can't wait to be doctors. And I think they think medical school is going to be like a grind. And I think they are astonished to hear that our students really seem to love being in medical school here. They feel well-rounded and well-supported. They have time outside of class to do things that they love. And we see all these great things on their application, and we want them to keep doing all of those great things sort of even outside of being amazing students when they're in medical school. And so I think that they are often really surprised, but also really happy to hear that you can be a real person and a happy person in medical school, and that our students genuinely enjoy their years at Pritzker. I've talked to alumni of ours that are now in residencies across the country. When I travel, I try and check in with them, and it's not uncommon that I will hear, "Oh my gosh, I miss my Pritzker days so much. Or I wish I was back in medical school." So I think medical school is more fun than possibly that students anticipate. And then the other thing is, I think people who haven't been to Chicago before don't understand what a great city it is. And actually, none of us here on the podcast today are even from the city of Chicago. And I think we're all people who relocated here and totally fell in love with it. And so I'll frequently hear like, "Oh my gosh, are the winters terrible? How did you move from Tennessee to Chicago? And do you ever want to move back?" And I mean, I will stay in Chicago forever. It's such a great city. There's so much to do. Our neighborhood, Hyde Park, is super livable. It feels like a small town within a big city, which I really like. And so I'll frequently get questions about Chicago, and is it hard to adjust? And how do you feel about the big city? And for me, Chicago is like one of the major highlights of our medical school, is just being in such a great city.
Yeah. Any other comments about Chicago?
It's just amazing.
Dr. Carter or Balaji?
I would love to hear Balaji's answer too. I just love this city so much. And I love the fact that I do get to live within a community that has such a sense of mission. And again, like Emily said, none of us are from Chicago originally. I spent most of my formative years in the South, in college and medical school, and transitioned up here for my residency training. And it is just the easiest city to transition into, no matter where you're from, because you do have Hyde Park, especially, has a very much a neighborhood feel. But then you can go 10 minutes up the lake and be in downtown and feel like you can, you can experience the hustle and bustle of a bigger city with all that it has to offer culturally and what have you. So I think it has such great history. It's a beautiful city. And yes, I just feel very privileged to live here and to serve the patients here.
Balaji, what's your take?
Yeah, to me, Chicago is the best city in the country. So I've enjoyed my time here. Whether it's going to like Broadway musicals like Hamilton, going to concerts, seeing the Bulls play in the United Center, going to Soldier Field to see the Bears. They constantly have races going through there, like 5Ks, marathons, things like that. And it's all very affordable on a medical student budget.
That's important.
So I've been able to do a lot of things that I have friends at cities like New York or San Francisco where they pay maybe double my rent than what I'm paying. And they are shocked to see how many things I'm going and doing in the city, just because it's very affordable for students.
That's great. I too lived in Chicago for a little bit, and now I call Cleveland, Chicago's artsy cousin. So I totally get it. So I think we have people hyped about Pritzker School of Medicine. So now let's make that next transition and go to the question that everybody always asks, and that's, all right, so how do I get in? What are you guys looking for? And this is something I ask everybody. So let's kind of make that transition to talk about selection, screening process. Let's just kind of start with the secondary. So the secondary goes out to everybody who submits a verified application to you. And then we get to the secondary application. Let's kind of talk a little bit about your questions, because I think we kind of debriefed or pre-briefed about this before we jumped on. And so you have 3 essays, or 2 required, 1's optional. First of all, is the optional essay optional?
It is indeed optional. It is not a game.
What do you typically see people writing in the optional essay, just as an example for folks?
They will write things like an update on what they are doing for their upcoming gap year. They may write an update or give us an update on a recent publication or a leadership role that they've taken. They may restate their interest in the Pritzker School of Medicine. So I think students use that essay for various different reasons and to accomplish different things. But I think the most common answers that I see are generally what they are up to and what they were not able to include in their main primary application.
You had mentioned earlier that Pritzker is a very mission-driven institution. And so the one essay, the first one is, tell us why you're applying to our medical school. And so kind of, and this is not an uncommon question, I think, for other medical school secondary application essays, is like, why are you applying to us? Like, what? Right. So kind of, how do you advise people? What are you looking for in that type of response?
The way I would advise applicants is to really reflect on your own personal mission and understand our mission the best that you can based on our website and the other media that we have out there, and try to understand how your own personal mission may align with ours. I think that would be step one. And then I think what we're trying to see again is potentially what the University of Chicago could provide to this particular applicant based on their interests and their experiences that would ensure that they are poised to have the impact in medicine that they want to have. I think, one of the things that I oftentimes say is that we have many, many amazing medical schools in this country. And I would even say that medical students that graduate from any of them are going to be great clinicians. But we are specifically looking for students who are intellectually curious and would be benefited by our scholarly programs. We want students who are interested in serving our patient population and have prepared themselves to engage in diverse populations, engage with diverse populations. And I think, we oftentimes would like to hear about other reasons that drove an applicant to apply to us. Is it our class size or what you've heard about our culture, the mentorship that you could receive here at Pritzker, so many different things. But really, again, I would say the best advice I could give is reflect on your own personal mission. What is it about Pritzker that you believe could position you to be in the best position to engage in your next phase of training?
Would you say it might be, not saying that people have to do this, but if they came to one of your talks or if they visited the campus, if they put that in there, is that sometimes helpful to kind of see some of that connection to your institution?
I think it can be, but it's not necessary, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So I think because sometimes I see this sometimes in the summertime, undergrads will contact us and say, hey, can we get a tour? I want to come visit and talk to you and tell you how much I like your school. And we have some days we do this, but I don't want people to think that you have to go and do that. Oh,
absolutely not. No, I would say that the majority of, I maybe would defer to Emily on this, the majority of applicants are not contacting us asking to come visit, I would say, and I would say the majority have actually not mentioned that they have been on our campus and have explored our school.
I totally agree. And I mean, we read amazing applications of people who are just, you read it and you can just so clearly see them in medical school here and how they contribute from people who have never even been to Chicago before, but they're able to articulate what about our mission was compelling to them, why their prior experiences would translate to them being amazing medical students here. So yeah, definitely not necessary and not required by any means.
Good. Because I don't want people to think that if you live thousands of miles away, that you have to make whether it's Chicago or another institution, that they have one of these mission-driven types of essays that I think some students might think, oh my gosh, I have to have a connection not only to the mission, but to the institution. Let me go try to make some appointment to go hang out there.
No, not necessary at all.
No. Look, and then the other question that you have, and again, it's specific to Chicago, but I think students will find that similar versions on some other med school applications is share with us a difficult or challenging situation you've encountered and how you dealt with it and your response. Should I talk about your coping skills and stuff? Right. So we were kind of talking about this before we jumped on, and what kind of challenges or difficult situations are you kind of looking for?
I can say that we are not looking for a specific type of challenging situation.
Bingo.
And I want to reinforce that. As a medical educator, what I will say is that I think two of the most valuable character traits of the most successful medical students would be resilience and adaptability. And
say that again. Say that again. That's so awesome.
Yeah, I think because, ultimately, if I am working, for instance, and I have with Balaji, I can say you can walk into the room and generally with this type of patient, you are going to go through this mental exercise and this algorithm. But Balaji has to walk in the room and he has to adapt sometimes to what he is seeing and how that patient or that family is communicating with him. And then also medical school is challenging, and you will have patient lives in your hands as a physician. And again, it is important that our medical students are able to be resilient and deal with challenges effectively and have a mindset that will allow them to grow from these challenges and not feel like they are, handicapped by them.
So what I'm hearing too is don't invent a challenging situation or a difficult situation.
I think if you invent anything on your application, you should maybe not be applying.
Yeah. Well, in fact, you have a clause on your website that says something about misrepresentation, but also don't. How about somebody else's challenge? Should you write about somebody else's challenge that you thought was challenging for you?
We see that a lot. We see that. And again, we were talking about this earlier. We don't expect students to have, these life-changing challenges necessarily. I don't think you are at a disadvantage if you do not have a traumatic experience that happened that you are writing about. I think sometimes when a student writes about someone else's challenge, it is not as effective in conveying, how you would learn from a situation had it happened to you.
Balaji, I want to pull you in here for a moment because you were in these shoes going through this application process not too long ago and probably pulling your hair out when you're getting essayed to death by medical schools that you're applying to. Kind of knowing what you know now, what would be your advice back to applicant Balaji who is, trying to fill all these essays out?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, the most important thing was just showing who I am as a person, and really trying to convey that through my writing. Because I totally get it. I remember I applied, I think, to like 15 schools, and I got like 15 secondaries, and all of those had to go back in a certain amount of time, and it adds up very quickly. And so I think just trying to really focus on each individual school and trying to relate how you would be a good fit at that institution and how that institution could help you is something that I would really go back and tell myself. I know I definitely was guilty of copy pasting certain parts from certain other essays to try to like Frankenstein an essay together. And those are the schools that I didn't have that good luck with. I think the schools where I genuinely sat down and thought about what is it about this school and what is it about me that would make it a good fit were the schools that I had the best luck with.
That's a good point. I'm glad you said that. Kind of a lesson learned, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So what's the screening process like? So you get a completed application. I've submitted it back to you, and now I sit and wait. What's going on behind the scenes? What kind of things is this going on in the screening process and looking for as you're pouring through all these applications?
Yeah, so I can take this one. We have a team of screeners here who are all a mix of faculty and staff who are members of the admissions committee, and we actually read every single application that we get. So a real person is opening up every file. I think applicants are sometimes surprised about that. We don't have sort of automatic algorithms that weed out certain candidates.
Mm-hmm.
We open every file that we get, and kind of like Dr. Carter mentioned a little bit ago, we're looking for students who are a fit with our mission. We also are looking for evidence that an applicant is going to be successful in medical school, that they have the academic background that indicates that they can do the work. But once somebody has cleared that bar, and we don't have any minimum GPAs or anything like that, but once we've seen that somebody can really tackle the work in medical school, then it's about, is this person ready to engage with the amazing patients that we have here? Do they align with our mission statement? Do they have an interest in research? Have they had leadership opportunities? Do they write with compassion? Do they care about other people? And what do their letter writers say about them? And so we really go through every piece of the application. We have a rubric that basically is pulled, again, directly from our mission statement. And
Wow.
we look for students who are well-rounded, who kind of check off all those boxes and seem like really great people that we'd want in our community, and then extend interview invitations based on that.
Kind of like, what are the things that you value in an applicant? Are there certain characteristics or attributes that stand out a little bit? I don't want to ask about specific experiences, because I know you're going to say there's not one specific experience, because then everybody will travel to go do that one thing. But are there characteristics or values that you like, gosh, that speaks to us?
So what I tell applicants when they ask me this, when I'm meeting with pre-medical students, is that the best applications I read are from students who are incredibly well-rounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have 5 first author publications and you are a researcher extraordinaire, but you have no service on your application, no amount of amazing research ability is going to make up for that. But the opposite is also true. If you are a servant of others and you have this amazing community work, but you have not engaged in scholarly work at all, or can't speak to how you would be engaged in it in medical school, as we talked about, we require all of our students to do research.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be told when those portions of the curriculum come up. And so for me, the best applications I read are from people who are well-rounded in ways that fit with our mission statement. And I think that's what makes admissions fun. For me, is that people live that out in different ways. People's scholarly interests are different. People's service interests are different. Their majors are different, and they've come from different parts of the country, but they sort of are well-rounded in their own ways. And it makes my job fun, because I'm not looking for one cookie cutter thing, and hopefully means, my job can't be automated anytime soon.
Well, Emily, let me ask you a follow-up to that. In that, let's say that I'm an applicant. I don't have research, but I'm really interested in it. I just didn't have time yet because I was a student athlete, or I was a student musician, where something was just had a huge time commitment somewhere else. But I want you to know that I'm really interested in doing research, but I just haven't had the right opportunity at the right time to start to get involved in it. Am I excluded, or are you interested in just knowing that I'm interested in doing it because it's a part of your curriculum?
Yeah, so definitely not excluded. And that's part of why we read every application, because not every student is going to have, the AMCAS experience type of research or of other things that we're looking for. So I think what we would want to see there is to understand why that wasn't a possibility for you. Some students don't go to strong undergraduate research institutions and haven't had those opportunities. Some students are working throughout college and haven't had the time to do it, or like you said, are varsity athletes. So I think what we would want to see is why that interest is there and sort of how that person can articulate it. And sort of our Why You Chicago essay is a great place to do that. So
Great.
I haven't had this time, but I've been really engaged in scientific literature in these ways, or having letters of recommendation that speak to intellectual
Oh, that's
curiosity
good.
and the opportunity and what you will do with opportunities in the future. And I think the other thing to note is that we talked a little bit about our scholarship and discovery program earlier, but it doesn't require that all students do basic science research. You can, and that's one of
We
the
didn't
tracks
mention that,
you
did
can
we? Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have 7 different tracks that involve things like community health or global health or even medical education. So someone's interest in teaching, somebody's interest in community engagement, that can be fodder for research and scholarly projects here at Pritzker. And so somebody might write a great essay about how they love teaching others and would engage in scholarly work related to medical education, which is one of the tracks that we offer here. So I think students can think broadly about what scholarly work means, and can still be prepared to come in and do that work, even if they haven't had time in undergrad for any number of reasons.
Yeah. And I have to guess that when you're saying don't have research experience, you're also considering that like there are people that have had an honors thesis or a capstone project, and they were a non-science major, but they had to do a capstone project for their French literature major. You would count that as like quote unquote scholarly work, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite interviews I did was somebody who was an English major and wrote a thesis that ended up getting published about Thoreau. And it was just fascinating to talk to them about their project and what they had studied and what they liked about it and kind of how they thought about it. And that was a great interview, even though it wasn't, I did this pipetting in a lab, while I was
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted people to hear that scholarly work doesn't always mean that you have to be in a lab or be doing basic science research or clinical research. You can be doing other parts of employing the scientific principles of research in other places, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So Emily, take us through. Okay, so now I've been invited to come interview at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. What's going to happen to me when I get there for my interview day? What's it like?
Yeah. So people never believe this before they attend the interview, but our interview day is actually really fun and people leave feeling really excited, I think, generally.
Yeah.
So I always like to let students know when I talk with pre-medical students, a lot of them are very, very nervous about the interview process. They view it as this big barrier to getting into medical school or a hoop they have to jump through or think they have to go prove themselves. And what I like to remind them is that if we have invited you for interview, we already really like you. We loved reading your essays. We are excited by what you could possibly contribute to our community. So when people come here for interview day, I have read their application front to back and back to front again, and I am thrilled about getting the chance to meet them. So we are excited to talk with them in more depth. And how we do that here at Pritzker is that the interview day has 2 main goals. So the first is for us to get to know the applicants in person, to see how they communicate, hear them talk about their experiences in more depth. But the other piece of it is for them to get to know the University of Chicago in person. You can't read everything on a website. You can't understand the people at a medical school just from what you read online. And so we have a pretty robust interview day. It starts off with a breakfast hosted by our Office of Multicultural Affairs. Something we haven't touched on yet in the podcast is that I think we're really fortunate to have one of the most diverse medical student bodies of any medical school in the country. And our students come from a variety of backgrounds. And we start off the interview day by having current students who are in our different multicultural affairs affinity groups. So the Latino Medical Student Association or Outpatient or LGBTQ Student Association have breakfast with our applicants. It's non-evaluative. It's just meant to give an introduction to the school, and the students are able to ask questions of our current students. And I think that sets a really nice tone for the day. It's welcoming. It shows one of the best parts of medical school here, which is the student body. After that, admissions will walk students through the interview day and talk a little bit about the schedule and prep them for what's to come. And then either Dr. Carter or our faculty associate director of admissions, a psychiatrist here on campus, Dr. Marcangelo, will walk students through the curriculum in detail.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the opportunities here? How do we train physicians? And so all of that kind of introduces students to our program before they even have to go do anything like talk to somebody about their motivations for why they want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So gets them engaged in what life is like here. And then students will interview with one faculty member, one member of the medical school administration, who's usually me or another member of the admissions and financial aid team, and then one medical student who is typically going to be someone like Balaji, who is really involved in the admissions process and will help evaluate the student for fit for like our student culture. And so those 3 interviews will happen. They have lunch with our students, and then we'll wrap them up at the end of the day and let them know where the process goes from there.
Let's unpack the interviews there. So the faculty interview, what's their level of access to the application?
Yeah, so the faculty interviewers will see kind of a limited application that includes the personal statement and the experiences, and then the secondary application as well. So they're going to be able to see what the student has written, and we actually do read the applications before interview as well. And so students will come into the interview, and the faculty member may ask them, "You wrote about this amazing experience. Tell me more about that." Or "I loved reading about XYZ on your application. Could we dig into that a little bit in person?" And the student interviewer actually has a similar level of access as well.
Okay. And then one unique one I've always felt that you guys have is that administrator interview. What takes place during that time? What level of access do you have? How is your interview different than the faculty interview?
Yeah, so our administrative interviewers, we see the entire file. So we have everything that's in there and can really ask about anything. How I like to frame my interviews with students is that I don't have a science background, and most of our admin interviewers do not. I'm an example of what your future patients might be like. How can you talk with me about your interest in medicine, about your research, about your interest in our program in a way that makes sense to me as someone who is not an MD? How can you connect with me? What are your communication skills like, for example? And then my other piece of it is that I think all of our admin interviewers know the University of Chicago really well and know our student body really well. And so a lot of it is seeing how someone would fit in our community, what kinds of opportunities they would engage in here, and talking with them about that, and also answering their questions. That's one of my favorite parts of the interview, where I get to talk with someone about my experiences here and answer questions that they might have that, again, they couldn't find on the website.
Balaji, I heard, students seem to have a heavy presence in the interview day. When it comes to your interview with the applicant, are there certain questions you have to ask, or is it kind of more kind of free form?
Yeah, there's no questions that any of us have to ask. We do have a rubric that we have to fill out after the interview.
Okay.
But I usually just let it be a free-flowing conversation and try to just gauge how this student would fit in with the rest of my classmates and whether this person was someone I could see as a future colleague. But no standard questions that we have to ask everyone.
Let me ask you guys, do you find the student interviewers are sometimes harder on the applicants than the faculty interviewers? No?
I don't think so. I mean, I think our students are approach every interview with humility and they remember, I think, what it feels like to be in their shoes. And so I feel that generally our students are able to give applicants the benefit of the doubt when they are really nervous, and they are actually the ones that I think are the most effective at getting applicants to relax a little bit and just engage in a discussion. So I would say that I don't think so. I don't think that our students are harder.
Kind of out and talking with some pre-med students, they're more worried about the student interview than the faculty interview, and I just don't know because they don't know what happens in it. They probably are preparing to talk about their research in their faculty interview or why they want to go to med school. But the med student one maybe is a little more of a black box for them. And so that's why I just was wondering if you felt like the students are harder. But Balaji, you don't feel like that way. What did you think about when you were going through this process when it came to the student interview?
Yeah, I thought the student interview was actually a great way to see what my classmates would be like in the future, and see what interests that they have and what they're involved with. Keep in mind that the people that you're interacting with on your interview day are most likely the people who are most involved in the school and have taken advantage of a lot of the opportunities that the school has to offer. And so you can see how legitimate all the claims schools make are by talking to all of these different students and getting their perspectives. For what it's worth,
that's great.
I think I try to advocate for every student that I interview as much as possible and really try to show their best side of their application.
Yeah. What is there any general advice you would give to applicants coming to interview at your school? Is there anything that you'd like them to kind of know coming into it? Do you send them any materials and say, here, this is how you should prepare?
We don't send them materials other than what's on our website, kind of what they've seen as they've been filling out their secondaries and things like that. We have a planning your interview day page on the website that goes over a little bit of the interview day structure. But in general, I would actually recommend they not over prepare. I think sometimes interviews go off the rails when an applicant has a script and they are determined to stick to that script. They feel like they need to come in and prove themselves and get out all of their highlights and talk about why they're amazing. And I think, again, they have to remember that we invited them here. We get plenty of applications. We don't have to invite anybody to interview that we're not really excited about meeting. So we already think they're great. And so I think, they should read over their application, remember what they wrote about, but really just come in and be prepared to talk about things that they're passionate about with people who are excited to hear that from them. I think, as Balaji said, we want people to do well at interview. My goal is not to trick them or stress them out or put them on the hot seat, but it's really just to get to know them a little bit better. And I think we also want to see what they're like as people beyond their application. What do you like to do in your free time? What motivated you to pursue this as a career? How would your friends describe you? Things like that you can't get a sense of on paper. But in general, you'll see students sort of extremely nervous when they walk into our building in the morning. And then by the time they're leaving, they are laughing and chatting and trading numbers with each other. And they feel like they generally had a really good day. So obviously there are nerves that come with interviewing. But in general, I would say don't over stress about it because, again, the school likes you and just wants to get to know you a little bit better.
Emily, I'm so glad you said that because it just keeps going with a theme we've been hearing in these different episodes with other admissions people that we're trying to set a tone for the day. And that's that we really want to meet the student who's not really stressed out. We're trying to get them to, we know this causes a lot of nervousness, these interview days, but we're trying to get them to kind of calm down and just kind of settle in because we really want to get to know them because we're excited about meeting them and they flew or drove miles and spent gobs of money to get there. We really just want them to have a great experience. Dr. Carter, is there any, when students come to you and say, how should I practice interviewing? What do you like? Because we tell them, you should practice interviewing. What do you tell them?
I would tell them to just reflect on your experiences and how you've changed and grown from them. Because I think that ultimately, again, we don't want necessarily students who are going to come in and, like Emily said, rehearse, all 5 bullet points that they have put together. But we want students who are going to be able to describe how they have thoughtfully grown from the experiences that they have put on their application and in their essays. So that's what I would say. I think ultimately we want students we are going to get to know even beyond the application. So I can't stress enough that in most of the time, if a student is so nervous and over prepared, it may come across as inauthentic. And if they could just relax a bit, be thoughtful about their experiences, how they've grown, what they've learned, and really just be able to describe your motivation for medicine effectively, I think that would be my advice.
Balaji, you've been through this process, and now I have to think you're getting ready to do it all over again. What are your reflections on it? When you kind of look back at your interview day experiences and kind of how you felt, and now you're getting ready probably to do that again for residency interviews?
Yeah, I think when I was first interviewing for medical school, I was extremely nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it would be to interact with peers who I thought initially I was competing for to get into the same medical school and competing for the same spots. But as I progressed through the cycle, I realized like these are my peers, these are my future colleagues, these are people I should be looking to make connections with. And so a lot of people who I interviewed with during the cycle are people who I now still keep in touch with who are at other institutions.
Oh, that's great.
And just taking advantage of the opportunity to explore the new cities that you're in, or taking advantage to get to see what the school is really like in person. I think it just gives you a different feel than looking at a website and just reading it. When you actually get to see what people emphasize on their interview days and what students are like during their interview day was something, because the school is just trying to sell you as much as you are trying to sell yourself to the school. So I think really thinking like that was really formative for me when I was making my decision at the end of the process as well.
Yeah. I hear you guys saying that, you see people at the end of the day, they're sharing Uber rides back to the airport together. They're laughing, they're smiling. It does happen. I want people to hear that this is real. Like they're not making this up. So we get through the interview day process. What happens then after the interview? You have admissions committee meetings, and kind of walk us through what that next chapter of the process is like at Pritzker.
Yeah, so we here at Pritzker have an admissions committee that is made up of majority faculty, chaired by 4 of our faculty members here at Pritzker, and then also includes a couple staff members, who are me and other members of the admissions team, and then medical students as well. So Balaji is one of those students. Every year we have 12 fourth-year students who sit on the admissions committee. And basically after the interview, when interviewers submit their comments, they go into the file, and then each committee meeting reviews a certain number of files, and they see everything. So I think oftentimes applicants have questions about, well, after the interview, do people even read my personal statement again?
Yeah,
or do they look at my letters of recommendation? We look at everything. So we want to consider everything in context. The admissions committee will read each application again, including everything the applicant has submitted, their letters of recommendation. We'll look at their interview reports from the interview day, and then we'll discuss every single applicant individually. I think sometimes applicants are a little annoyed with how much waiting there is involved in the admissions process. And I always like to remind them, you wrote a lot of really great things and you put a lot of effort into this application, and we want to give that application its due. And we sit down and pour over every single word that is in there, and really try and think about the class that we're putting together, what students are right for our community, and that process can take some time. But I think ultimately the benefit is to the student, because we really do try and put a lot of time and effort into reviewing those files. So the committee will read the files. They will ultimately assign a score to each file, and then our chairs of the committees will ultimately decide which students are accepted from that list.
You mentioned that you have a large group of fourth-year students on the admissions committee. And Balaji, what do you feel the student voice brings to that committee, that meeting? What do you guys, what's your value there?
I think the further you get away from the process, you get maybe a bit more critical, I feel like sometimes, at least from when I was sitting on the committee. And I think just to remind everyone in the committee that, look, this is a great applicant, and really try to advocate for the students and try to recognize where they're coming from, what resources they actually had access to during their time. And just to say, like, this person would be a really good fit for our community, and they would be a really great peer.
And Dr. Carter, what do you value in the students' perspective that are in those meetings? That when you're like, gosh, I'm so glad they're here.
They remind us that often there are students just like this person within our student body, and they have thrived. And I think when the students bring that perspective, it's so valuable. So we lean on the students to think about how the applicant would function within our student body. Would they be collaborative? Would they be a support system for the other classmates? Would they find their academic home here with all of the resources that we have? So I think that the faculty and the faculty chairs will often ask the students in the committee to speak up and give their opinion regarding those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a number of medical schools that have medical students on their admissions committees, and I think it's great. And because I find in our experience that sometimes the medical students bring us back down to earth a little bit, and they'll say, as a pre-med, you don't know about that thing, or that's so hard to do or get, and we're like, oh, really? Okay, we thought it. And so I find that they kind of bring us back, give us some perspective, because they might say, oh, as a pre-med, you sometimes you're really lost. You have no idea what that thing is or what you're talking about. And Balaji, maybe you can chime in on this, that sometimes you find that there are students that say, oh, we need somebody who's quiet or a little more reserved on our team, because you can't have 10 bombastic, gregarious, outgoing, commanding the room people, because it goes nuts.
Absolutely. And I think trying to find people with diverse backgrounds and diverse perspectives is always something that we're striving for as well.
Because you're the users, right? Exactly. You're the consumers. You know what works in your teams and in your class, and sometimes what can be kind of the quirks or not work. So so let me ask the admissions people: what if I'm an applicant placed on the wait list? Do I have a shot at getting in? Do you use the wait list? Do you want to hear from me? How do I express my dying love to come to Pritzker?
Yeah, I think Dr. Carter would agree with me on this. We love taking students off the wait list. I think sometimes students are, of course, disappointed if they, don't get in immediately after acceptance. But we tend to roll out acceptances pretty slowly. We have a tiny medical school, and we really don't want to over enroll our classes, and so we tend to, take it slow where we can. And we love the opportunity to, over the course of, May and June, admit those students that we've been thinking about all year, that we're so excited about and can't wait to get them in the class. So we really like using the wait list. I think that the best thing that they can do is keep in touch with us. And we know that applicants get different rules from different medical schools about how and when you can update your application and how you can contact the admissions office. I think we are on the extreme liberal end of, we want applicants to contact us with all of their questions and with their updates. And I think, there are students that by the time they get into the medical school, especially off the wait list, I've known them for a whole year at that point. I've read their application the summer before. I interviewed them maybe for medical school. And we're here to really help make the process easier for them and answer their questions. And I think it's absolutely helpful to check in with us, not every 48 hours, but maybe, once every couple of weeks, saying, I'm still really interested in your program for these reasons, or here are the things that I've been doing this summer. So in general, I think we really love to hear from the students after their interview day, even maybe before they've gotten their admissions decision. Keeping in touch with us, asking their questions. And we certainly look at that as we're, recommending students for acceptance off the wait list. Is this somebody who's a great fit for us, but also what indications of interest have they shown?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Carter, any
I
comments
think that
on that?
Emily said that perfectly. We are available, and we encourage our students, our applicants, when they are here at Pritzker, as they are getting ready to leave, we restate that. Please reach out to us. Ask us any questions. We will certainly connect you with students who you may have similar interests with, and we would also absolutely encourage students to let us know if they are interested in our program.
What I'm hearing here is there's no shame in being on a wait list
Absolutely
or an alternate list.
That's correct.
Right?
Oh my God. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite students have been admitted off the wait list.
Yeah. I want students to hear that we have, from an admissions perspective, we have to be mindful. And like Emily said, not oversubscribing. And because we all have really small classes, and compared to an undergrad class that has thousands of students sometimes. And so we have to kind of draw the line somewhere, but know that we have really, really strong students that we just, you can't pull the trigger on all the time. So, but we're dying to get to those wait lists sometimes.
That is true.
Right?
Yeah. I was just, sorry, Emily.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, sometimes this is how we round out the class, and we have, the wait list is really how we can balance the class and make sure we have diverse students represented, students of diverse interests, and so I also just want to say that we understand how vulnerable the applicant is and may feel during the waitlist process. And I hope that your listeners really do understand that we know how long and difficult this process is. And it is true that, it seems like a long time to wait for a decision. But again, we hope that we can mitigate some of that with the communication that we can have and do have with the applicants. Yeah.
Balaji, from your perspective, you've been through this again. What do you tell people, or what do you remember from that part?
I just want to stress again that being put on a wait list isn't an indictment of your intelligence or your experiences or anything like that. We just have a lot of great people coming through during our interview day, and we can't take everyone. Some of my peers who have come off the wait list are some of the smartest, highest achieving people that Pritzker has. And so I think sometimes it's almost better to come off the wait list. So I just think the waiting game is really hard. And it's hard it's easy to say this on this side and be like, just do something to take your mind off of it. But that's what I strongly suggest. And I think I will be ending up doing that starting in February when I'm waiting to make my match list. And I'll be trying to take my own advice at that point.
Right. Well, I'm glad that this topic came up, because I want people to know that we realize this is we're trying to be humane in a very sometimes inhumane application process. The waiting can be just really long and painful. And we know that on our end too. Any final thoughts as we kind of wrap things up here? Any final thoughts on things we may have touched on a little bit, or things that you wanted to share or make sure that we got out there about Pritzker or about the application process, that coming in and preparing for today, that you're like, I want to make sure that we talk about these things?
I just want to say that I understand that most of the applicants that we see are driven towards excellence. That is true. And I think in the application, what I specifically am looking for is, even in the midst of being driven towards excellence, you are keeping the proper perspective, and that is other people. And I hope that applicants will really take time to think about their application and how they're communicating, because, if you think about it, sometimes a drive towards excellence can be in conflict with other centeredness. And I think it takes a special type of person to still excel, but have their focus be other people, the patients that they're going to serve, the communities in which they live, the classmates that they are working alongside. So because Pritzker is such a collaborative environment with a small student body of 90 students per class, we cannot sacrifice that collaborative culture and that supportive culture that we have here. And so for us, it is extremely important that we are bringing in applicants who who are communicating that even though they are excellent and they have excelled in so many different areas, their primary goal is to serve the suffering.
Wow. That was awesome. You just summed everything up right there. I mean, we could end right there. Dr. Carter, that was amazing. Oh, wow, it's really inspiring. How about this? Let's wrap up with just some personal recommendations. Is there a book, a podcast, a blog, some clickbait that you just get enjoyment from, or you're inspired by, or you're educated from that you like, that you would share with people? Kind of go around the table. Emily, is there something that you recommend to people?
Yeah.
Besides Bama football?
I know. Catch the Crimson Tide on Saturdays. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I find that the farther away that I get from school, the more I like to read and to learn new things and to broaden my worldview and things like that. The book I always recommend is one that's sitting on my bookshelf right now. It's called The Emperor of All Maladies, and I think it's a great read for anybody interested in medicine. But I read it even before I worked in medical school admissions. It's a history of cancer, and I think it's written by a clinician, and it talks about sort of humans' understanding of cancer as a disease, but also draws on the one-on-one patient encounters that he had, and talks a lot about just how the public interacts with medicine. How do we fundraise to look for cures, and why do we have to do that, and what has been our understanding of the science? And it's something that I read while I was in law school, and then after I started working in medical school admissions, went back and read it again, and took away totally new things from it. And it was really interesting to read it after I started working in medicine to, again, just get a sense of the history of something that affects so many patients, and also see names that were familiar to me, Chicago luminaries that popped up that I didn't even know who they were before I worked in medicine. So I would highly recommend that. And I try and read, and when I'm not reading applications, try and read a lot of nonfiction, since I don't have the luxury of being a student anymore.
Yeah, excellent suggestion. Balaji, anything that you recommend to people?
One book that I recently read was Educated by Tara Westover. It's a book about a young woman who grew up in rural Utah, in a family who maybe limited her access to education growing up, and how she kind of struggled to make the next steps to be able to go to college, and then eventually go on to Oxford and Harvard and all of these things. And I think that book was really empowering for me, because it showed me what a privilege I have to be able to go through this process and get an education and have access to so much resources, and just how lucky I am. So that was a great read, and I highly recommend it to everyone. And then a podcast that I listen to is Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh, yeah.
Great podcast. And he also has a multitude of great books as well. And just something to take your mind off of maybe medicine and focus on different aspects of the world.
I just listened to one of his coming into work today. It's fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. Dr. Carter.
I think, I think I will tie this into the book that I recommend, but I think it's extraordinarily important for medical students to understand the populations that they serve. And so wherever your listeners matriculate, I would encourage them to read books about the patients that they are serving, the communities in which they will work and live and serve. So for me, one of my favorite books is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. It is a beautifully written masterpiece about the Great Migration, and features Chicago, and quite specifically often the South Side of Chicago very prominently in the writing. And it really gives you a deeper look into how these communities within our city came to form. And again, it's just beautifully written. And I think that it is so important for physicians, trainees to remember who they are serving and to know about them and to know about their communities. So I'm sure there are other books written about many, many different areas in the United States. I do love The Warmth of Other Suns.
That's excellent. I'm going to put links to all these recommendations that you have given me on the show site, so people they want to take links and go check them out on their own. These are all really great ones. I can't thank you three enough. The Pritzker admissions team. This has been such a rich conversation and entertaining. I've had fun talking with you guys. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
It was really wonderful to be with you, Christian.
Thanks. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. So I'm going to let you guys go. Get back to work and screen applications, and Balaji, start working on those residency applications. All right. Hey, thanks. I'll see you guys around.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.